DreAllDay.com. Tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves anyone out there, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. We put all this together in one bundle, one package, one mindset, one method, one philosophy, one book, one show, this daily masterclass that is known as Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. Today's topic is why I look to entertainment entrepreneurs over athletes as the source of as some of my virtual mentors. Now, this is something that I have touched on before, but I never did a full episode actually talking about it. But people have always asked me over the years, especially since I've been doing any type of mindset or personal growth material. This is starting back in the day, over 10 years ago on YouTube. And then, of course, into this show, which began in 2016, live streams, books, things like that. People ask me, well, who are your mentors or people that you learn from or people that you're inspired by or people who you look up to, whatever ways you want to describe it. And you've heard some of my virtual mentor episodes I've done. Let me give you the exact numbers of those virtual mentors episodes. Virtual mentors let's go from number one. Number one was masterclass number 195, Sean Puff Daddy Combs. Number two, Sean Jay-Z Carter. That was number 281. Number three was masterclass number 316. That was Curtis 50 Cent Jackson. Number four, masterclass number 488. That was Damon Dash. And number five, masterclass number 1217. And that was Michael Jordan. He was actually the first and only athlete on the virtual mentors list. Those are only five that I've done so far. I don't know if I have any other virtual mentors. If I think of one, then I'll bring them up. Maybe I'll do one on myself. But anyway, when people ask me about my virtual mentors, who I look to, draw inspiration from, I almost never choose athletes, even though my background is as an athlete. Now, granted, I'm also an entrepreneur, but I'm not in the music business. All these people are in music. Puff Daddy, 50 Cent, Jay-Z, Dame Dash, these guys are all in the music industry. Now, the reason why the entrepreneurs that I picked are all in the music industry is simply because, along with sports, that's another major influence in my life. I've always listened to hip hop music from the time I was a young child. My parents used to listen to hip hop music back in the 80s. And then growing up, I picked it up and I started listening to it, whatever was out in my era through the 90s, then the early 2000s, and now up to now. Now, admittedly, I'm not as up to date on all the newer artists that have come out, let's just say in the last 5 years in hip hop, simply because nowadays I listen to a lot of audio books and a lot of just audios like podcasts and things like that. So I'm not as up on it now as I was, but I'll get some teenagers around me so I can learn. They can tell me what's going on, who I need to be paying attention to if they're any good. But that's the reason why all these entrepreneurs that I'm mentioning here are not computer people or I don't know what's the other things. They started brick and mortar, certain type of businesses. They're people from the hip hop industry because that's just been a huge influence on my life, the way that I grew up and the kind of information that was around me from my environment. But they are all entrepreneurs in the business world. So what today we're talking about is not really about what specific industry they're in, just the fact that they're entrepreneurs in the business world as opposed to me looking to athletes, even though my background is in playing professional sports. I want to explain why this is and how I came to look at things the way I look at it. So hopefully you get some insight from this. That's I'm either trying to give you something direct or give you something that indirect that can give you some insight, even if I'm just talking about myself, which I am doing here today. So please listen closely and take notes. Point number one, today's topic, once again, why I look to entertainment entrepreneurs or just entrepreneurs, period, over athletes as my virtual mentors. Point number one, business owners. So when I say entrepreneurs and business owners, I'm using those terms interchangeably here today. Business owners have to beat out more competition to win than an athlete does. Yes, this is true. Listen, you're listening to a professional athlete here. So any athletes who are listening to this who may be wondering how the hell I could even say that, since sports it's so much harder to get into the sports world than it is the business world. How can I even make that statement? Let me explain. I'll tell you. In sports, let's just say basketball specifically. Basketball has built-in filters. There's a built-in filtering system that once everyone who is eligible gets through that filter, the number of people you have to beat out to get to your spot is much smaller than the number of people that a business owner or entrepreneur has to beat out to become a success. Whatever they determine is a success, they don't have to beat out, or the business owner has to beat out a whole lot more people. There's a lot more competition in business than there is in sports. And again, that's not to say that there's no competition in sports, that it's easy to make it in sports. Guarantee you, I promise you that it's not. But in sports, as far as, again, the sport of basketball, I'm 6 feet 4 inches tall. Had I been 5'4" or 5'9" or 5'7", would I have even been in the room to get my chance to play professional basketball? Probably not. I mean, I could have went to an event and tried out and things like that, but I wouldn't have gotten the same looks and the same opportunities or even the same consideration simply because of my size. In basketball, there's a certain size that you need to be for certain teams and certain decision makers to even look at you as a possible. If you're 5'7" trying to play professional basketball, you're gonna have to be like lights out amazing. If you're 6'7" playing professional basketball, you don't have to be lights out amazing. You just gotta have a few tools that could possibly help a team. And there is a huge difference between those. In the business world, what requirements are there for you to actually be able to be in business? There are pretty much zero requirements. Now, of course, you could have a license and some trademarks and maybe a website if you want to print up some business cards. Maybe you want to register your business in the state in which you work, register your business with the government and all those things, pay business taxes, have a business bank account. All of those things are nice to have, but you technically don't really have to have any of those. You can still be in business. You can start creating things and selling them. You can bake cakes at your house and sell them to people in the neighborhood and not have any type of licensing or anything and make some money off it. That is technically, that's business. You're creating a product or service, you're offering it in exchange for money, and people are willing to make that exchange. Technically, you are in business. In the business world, if you want to be the best cake baker or you want to be the highest selling cake baker, you got to beat out everybody out there who's baking cakes, and anybody can get into the cake baking business if they so choose. Not anybody can get into the basketball business even if they wanted to. A bunch of 5'8" and under people want to get into the basketball business, they ain't getting in simply because of their size, regardless of how good they are. This is just the game. That is the game that you signed up for. In the sports world, there are filters when it comes to physical talent, when it comes to your physical build, when it comes to just your athletic traits, your athletic abilities for every sport. Football, baseball, basketball, hockey, gymnastics, swimming, track and field. If you don't have a certain physical makeup, you don't have a certain level of talent, you are not going to get the opportunity, even if you want it, even if you work really hard, even if you are completely dedicated and you got all the discipline, confidence, mental toughness, and personal initiative in the world. There is a limit to how much opportunity you can get in the sports world. The sports world is set up that way, that it filters out anyone who doesn't have the physical tools or the physical requirements to compete. I'm not saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just explaining to you that that's the game. In the business world, these filters do not exist, which means everybody can be in the business world. Not everybody can play ball, even if they want to. Have I said that enough times already here? So the business person who becomes successful and really stands out amongst everybody, there's no filter that blocked 95% of their competition, possible competition, from coming in the room. If you're a very successful entertainment person, anybody could have tried to become an actor. All right, now, yes, is there talent you can have for it? Yeah, but you don't really know till somebody gets in the room and gets on stage or in front of that camera. As a musician, exact same thing. And you got to get the fickle public audience to buy into whatever it is that you're selling and agree that you're actually good. Art is a really hard industry to be at the top of, and entertainment is art. To get a whole bunch of people to agree that you're the best at it is not a very easy thing to do. Now, it's not something that I've ever tried, but I would bet that it's really damn hard to get a bunch of people to agree with your art, because beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. So we got any artists listening to this, you tell me if I got that right or if I don't. Business entrepreneurs got to battle against everybody. All right, basketball players, we are competing against a small percentage. When I was playing professional basketball, my competition was not every other basketball player in the world. My competition was every basketball player in the world who was probably, let's say, 6'1" and taller. That was pretty much my competition. Not everybody. And most men are not 6'1" and taller. The average man is under 6 feet tall. In business, everybody can play. All right, basketball, everybody can't, but in business, everybody can play. And even when you're in business and you feel like you got a good product or service or offering, you still have to draw attention away from anything that anybody else is doing just to get them to even know that you exist, to get them to even notice your stuff, just to get some attention on you. If you're making a song, you got to get everyone's attention off of whatever other songs they're already listening to, whatever other artists they know, and any other thing that they could possibly be doing just to pay attention to you. And then they pay attention to you, then they got to like you, then they got to stick with you long enough and liking you that you get around to your offering, whatever you're selling, and then they actually buy it. There's a lot of steps you got to go through to start creating those exchanges in business. In the sports world, if you're good at what you do, and you get recognized, let's say you're a 6'8" and you're a great athlete and you end up in the NFL or the NBA, all right, they're gonna sign you to a contract and the checks just keep coming in. You don't have to worry about selling anything. You ain't gotta sell tickets, you ain't gotta sell t-shirts, you don't have to sell concessions, you don't have to sell parking lot spots, you don't have to sell nothing. All you gotta do is play your game and the money comes in automatically. Now, are there people selling within that infrastructure? Absolutely, but it's not you. You don't have to sell. Now, all you gotta do is show up, and all you gotta do is shut up and dribble, or shut up and catch the football, or shut up and hit the hockey puck, or swing a bat at the baseball. All you gotta do is play your game, and everything else is taken care of for you. In the business world, you gotta take care of everything. It is a lot more work. There's a whole lot more competition. There is less structure as to what exactly you got to do, where exactly you got to go. Like, I can write a book. I wrote a book called The Overseas Basketball Blueprint that lays out exactly what you need to do to play professional basketball. Then I wrote another one about exposure camps, the truth about overseas basketball exposure camps. I wrote another one called Overseas Basketball Secrets, just explaining the structure of overseas and how it works. Then I wrote another one called Basketball Agents Decoded that is all about how to get an agent, what agents are looking for, why agents do what they do. I'm giving you the whole blueprint because I can lay out a framework for how it works because it's finite. In the business world, people could write books. Anybody could write a book about how business works, but there could be 1,000 different books about business. They could all be accurate and all be completely different. Isn't that interesting? In the basketball world, that's not possible. All right, somebody writes a book that's completely different from mine about overseas basketball, they probably don't know what the hell they're talking about. They probably wouldn't because they ain't got the experience that I got. I've cornered that market. But the whole point is this. Basketball or sports in general is finite. It's finite, the number of competitors, it's finite, the number of people who can get in. Therefore, when you are in competition in sports, you are competing against a limited number of people. It could be a big number, but it's a limited number. It is not an unlimited number of participants in sports. In business, the participant number is literally unlimited. Anybody can get in the game and you have to compete against all of them in order to win. So the reason why this is point number one is because it takes more effort, more skill, and more people you got to beat to succeed in business than it does in sports. Again, not to say that sports is easy. Point number two, today's topic is why I look to entrepreneurs over athletes as virtual mentors of mine. Second thing, ownership. When you are a professional athlete and you're playing your sport for whatever team you play for or whatever competitions you're in, I don't care if you're a golfer, tennis player, what's the other individual, a wrestler, MMA fighter, all of those, you don't own anything through your playing. Now, you can own things outside of your playing. You could take the money that you made playing your sport and then go buy things and invest in equity and things like that and own things on your own independently as a man or a woman. But when you're a professional athlete, just the fact that you're playing, you don't own anything. So if I sign a contract and play for the New York Knicks and I help them win 3 championships in a row, I still have 0 ownership stake in the New York Knicks at the end of that 3 years. It's the same 0 that I had before I was even playing for the New York Knicks. You get no ownership of anything when you're doing your thing as an athlete. Even though you're working damn hard and you could be really good, you could be producing a whole lot of success for a whole lot of people, you own nothing. Playing sports is a contract job. That's what it is. You're technically not a full-time employee of the team you play for, but you also are not the owner of the team you play for. You're a contractor. All right, you sign a contract. This is how long the contract is, and during the period of this contract, you work for us. All right, this is the agreement on how it's going to go. Here are the things you got to do. Here are the things you don't do, et cetera, et cetera. You're a contractor. You are not an owner. Now, again, as I said, you can take your money from playing your sport and do whatever you want to do with it. You can be an owner in that way, but the work itself only pays for as long as you're playing and working. And this is something that I always thought about even before my professional athletic career had begun. I thought, all right, when I'm playing my sport, they're gonna be writing me a check, right? You get paid while you're playing your sport, but as soon as you stop playing, the checks stop coming. I mean, think about somebody like Michael Jordan. How much equity and value did he build in the Chicago Bulls? And how much did he take with him when he stopped playing? So the answers to those 2 questions respectively are a lot and 0. even though Michael Jordan probably did more to build the value of the Chicago Bulls franchise than anyone in the history of the Chicago Bulls. Can we agree? I think everyone can agree with that. Michael Jordan alone did more to build that business than anybody. And Michael Jordan, to this day, you know how much of the Chicago Bulls he owns? Zero. None. Not because Michael Jordan did anything wrong, but because that's the way sports is set up. The players don't own anything. You are a contracted worker. And now we're going to pay you fairly while you're working here. We agreed to the contract, we negotiated it, but you don't own a damn thing. Whoever owns the team, they get to participate in all the upside that comes from your participation as a player. Again, this is not an unfair thing. All right, this is not anyone, no one's being taken advantage of here. This is just the way the game is set up. And playing sports, again, being a contract job, as soon as you can't play, they kick you out on the street, and what you have done to build that brand stays with the brand. How much did Michael Jordan build the Bulls? How much did Kobe and Shaq build value and equity in the Los Angeles Lakers? How much value did LeBron James add to the Cleveland Cavaliers? Whatever your answer is, I think we all can agree they all added something to the bottom line value of those businesses. And guess what? All of the equity in the Bulls, the Lakers, and the Cavs, respectively, stayed with the Bulls, Lakers, and the Cavs when all those guys left. Don't any of those guys own not 1% of any of those organizations. Last time that I checked. All the equity stays with the owners. In the business world, you own everything from day one. If you start your own business, you own that whole thing. Now, as the saying goes, 100% of zero is still zero, but as long as you start to build some equity and some value on what you're doing, all right, now you got something that's worth something. Imagine if Kobe and Shaq took whatever the Lakers were worth when they came, and then they were able to divest when they got out. Would they have made some money? I would think so. They won some championships. I think they were pretty damn good. Michael Jordan, LeBron, I think they all would have made some money. The owner of the basketball team is in business. The athlete is the contractor. The owner of the Bulls, who is a guy named Jerry Reinsdorf, at least as of today's recording, he owns the Chicago Bulls. There are multiple people who own these big sports organizations, but he's the face guy. All right, he made a lot of money. He owned from the beginning. As soon as he became the owner of the team, he was making money and participating in the upside of whatever those players did. Now, were the Bulls always great? No, they are not that great of a team actually to this day right now. But Jerry Reinsdorf made himself a lot of money during the years that Michael Jordan was playing, and even since Michael Jordan's been gone, the Bulls are still eating off the value that Michael Jordan helped add to that franchise. As people will buy a Chicago Bulls t-shirt because it makes them think of Michael Jordan and he ain't played in 20 years. That's the way that it works. Kobe and Shaq with the Lakers, LeBron with the Cavs, all of those things. I like personally, as the business person in me, likes the idea of owning assets. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. Not just owning anything like a car or a house or a cell phone or some clothes, but owning something that puts money in your pocket actively. Those are called assets. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket, or it costs you money to even have it. Most vehicles are liabilities. Now, some vehicles, there are a small percentage, few handful, that their value actually goes up over time, like some vintage type vehicles and things like that. I don't know much about that. I'm not a car person at all. But assets, like owning a business, something that is generating revenue and consistently putting more money in your pocket, those are the kind of things that any type of business owner wants to own. All right, even athletes. There are plenty of athletes these days that, you hear about athletes nowadays. They're doing other things outside of their sport that they can own because they understand that they don't want to just be a contracted employee working for that sports team. And then when they're done, they got the money, but all the value that they added to that organization, they don't get to take any of that with them, but while the owner gets to keep it. So they want to be an owner too. They say, all right, this is what owners get. Okay, let me become an owner some way in my own way. Business is an asset. And what better company to work for than the one that's going to pay you even when you don't work there anymore? If you start your own organization, let's just look at somebody because the topic here today is why I look to entrepreneurs instead of athletes. Look at somebody like Jay-Z. Jay-Z, for those of you who don't know, if you haven't listened to that masterclass where I talked about Jay-Z, when he was trying to get his break into the music business, and let me tell you that Jay-Z masterclass, in case y'all didn't know, it's masterclass number 281. My Virtual Mentors Part 2, Sean Jay-Z Carter. He was trying to get his break into the music business. Nobody wanted to sign him. He was trying to become pretty much the same thing an athlete is. The athletes are the contractors. He was trying to become a contractor for any record label that wanted to sign him. And the challenge was no record label was that interested. Not because Jay-Z didn't have talent, but because they were all looking like, well, we don't think there's anything that marketable or unique about you, sir. And at that time, there was no proof that he would be anything. So Jay-Z actually did the opposite of what most rappers were trying to do. He went and said, all right, I'm gonna start my own company and I'll just sign myself and I'll work for myself. So that's what he did, and then he started putting his music out, and the rest became history, and now Jay-Z is one of the greatest musicians of all time. So the entire time that Jay-Z was putting out his music and building his career and making himself better, working on his game, because when he first came out, people weren't quite sure. But as he continued to work on his game and continued to build his brand and his business, it became worth more and more money, and he got to participate in the upside the entire time. Puff Daddy, same thing. 50 Cent did a lot of the same thing with his brand, G-Unit. Even though he was signed to a label, he actually was a contractor for a while as a label, but his record sold so much that he made enough money that he could take that and invest in his own things and be an owner in other ways at the exact same time. Damon Dash, who is not a musician like these other guys, he's not a guy who's on stage dancing and rapping. He's always talked about ownership. And if you listen to that masterclass where I talked about Dame Dash, you'll hear him talking about that a lot. That was, again, masterclass number 488. Damon Dash. Michael Jordan. I'm sure Michael Jordan owns some things. He became an owner in the NBA. So now he owns a team. He gets to participate in the upside, even though the team that he owns has not been good at all the entire time he's owned it. But who knows? As long as he sticks around and maybe they get lucky and get better, maybe they'll start actually being worth something. And I don't know if his team is making money or not, but I'm sure Michael Jordan got some people around him who can give him some good information. Michael Jordan with the Air Jordan brand, they say the guy's making over $100 million every single year just from his royalties off of the Jordan brand. And he doesn't even own the Jordan brand. Nike owns the Jordan brand. So another example, when you're an athlete, you could even get an endorsement situation with a company, but unless you get a piece of the company, a piece of the ownership, you are still only being paid a percentage of what's actually coming in. The company is getting the majority of it, you're getting some of it. So if Michael Jordan's making $100 million a year from the Air Jordan brand, imagine how much Nike is making from the Air Jordan brand every single year, because they're the ones who own it, and they get a much bigger size of the pie than Michael Jordan is getting. Again, not to say that Michael Jordan did anything wrong. This is the game. When you are an owner, you get to keep more of the money than everybody else does. This is just the way the game is set up. Point number 3, and that's why you want to be an owner. Point number 3, today's topic is why I look to entertainment entrepreneurs instead of athletes as my virtual mentors. Number 3, longevity on the job. Now, you can't be an athlete forever. Now, some sports you can play longer than others. Golf is the first one that comes to mind. All the other sports, they are young man's and young woman's games. That's what they said. Athletic careers, ladies and gentlemen, are very short in the grand scheme of life. The average NFL career is 3.5 years. Now, if you make whatever you think somebody in the NFL makes for 3.5 years, that's a nice chunk of money, but now you gotta live, let's say you live to 70 years old. Now you gotta live 66 and a half more years off of that. The years before you got to the NFL and the years after. All right, let's say you're 30 when you get out of there. You got 40 more years to live off the money you made for 3.5 years. It might not be enough. Now you're gonna have to do some other things, right? Average NBA career, 4.8 years. Average baseball career, 5.6 years. Average hockey career, 5.5 years. That's not a long time. It may feel like a long time. Maybe while you're in it, maybe it seems like a long time if you're on the outside looking at those numbers and then you're thinking about how much money the average player makes. And you're like, oh, well, multiply that by this many years, so that's a good amount of money. Yes, however, how long is a career and everything else? How long does the average teacher work as a teacher before they retire? How long does the average construction worker work? How long does the average entrepreneur career last? Our sports careers are the shortest careers. I would say the only other industries where your career is as short as a sports career would be like porn or being a stripper, or what else is there? I would just say those two. All right, everything, porn, stripping, and sports are the shortest careers in the world. If there's any other careers that are just as short, y'all let me know. I'm not thinking of them off the top of my head. I don't know why I'm thinking of those, but sports is the topic here. Now, I'm not talking, when I say in business, the average business career, I'm not talking about the average career or lifespan of a company itself. Because according to statistics, half of new businesses are out of business within 5 years. So it's just like sports. I'm talking about an individual person as an entrepreneur. How long of a career do they have? Well, their career is pretty much from the time they start until they die. All right, many entrepreneurs just work until as long as they want to. Maybe they retire, but even when they retire, they're still making money off the thing, whatever that thing is. Whether they Maybe they cash out. Maybe they'll just keep making some money off it, let somebody else run it, give it to their kids in their will or something. But they're still making some money off it, unless they just completely sold the entire entity, and then they probably started something else so they can have their next generation be good, or whatever it is that they're going to do. There is no limit to the length of a business career for an individual person. If your knee is bothering you, you might not be able to play in the NFL anymore, but you can still close deals as a business owner. If you lose a step physically, you might not be able to keep a job in the NBA, but you can still make money you can still make more money when you're old and lost a step in the business world than you can in the sports world. You lose a step in the sports world, you might be stepping on your way out of the industry. All right, you could be physically spry and make less money than when you're old and you can't even move that fast anymore, because the business is really more about your mind and your communication skills than it is about your physical tools. And we know, as I already said, sports is a young man's and a young woman's game. And that's why when people get to 30, 40 years old, they're out of the game in sports, but they still got another half of their lives to live. What other skills do you bring to the table? And if you didn't hear me talk about the other skills that athletes are going to need in life after sports, listen to masterclass number 284, where we talk about mastering the athlete to business transition. Masterclass number 24, why an athlete needs non-athlete skills for life. I just talked in masterclass number 15, 17, why I don't like the whole more than an athlete concept, even though that may sound like what I'm talking about here today. Masterclass number 1222, what a pro athlete should invest in while playing their sport. And there was one more that I know I talked about athletes when it came to outside of the sports world. Masterclass number 760, athletes, sports is just part of your job. And let me see if I can grab it. Masterclass number 505, the mental transition from athlete to real life. Make sure you refer yourself to all of those masterclasses about athletes. And you can see, to wrap up this third point, many athletes eventually move into business after they're done playing sports, because I knew when I was playing sports that was going to be my next step going into business. It was something that I started doing while I was still playing, because my career wasn't going as smoothly as I wanted it to. But even if my career had gone perfectly smooth, I knew I was going to get into the business world after I was done playing sports, because I'd already read a bunch of books on business, and I knew that I wasn't going to stop playing at, let's say, age 35 or 40 or 30 and then just sit around and do nothing for the rest of my life and just live off the rest of my laurels of the fact that I've been a professional athlete. All right, eventually you become a former professional athlete, and nobody cares about a former professional athlete. All right, believe me. All right, people only care about what you're doing right now. What are you currently? What you used to do is cool as long as you're doing something now. All right, now what you used to do isn't cool if you're not doing anything right now. All right, because the thing that you used to do, you can add it as a footnote and it'll look good if it's just a footnote and you got something going on right now. But if you ain't got nothing going on and the only thing you can say about yourself is what you used to do, all right, nobody really wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear a has-been. All right, I don't care whatever that has-been thing was, nobody wants to hear from a has-been. We want to hear from somebody who's doing something now, and what you used to do is an additional nice thing that can be added into the conversation. You understand what I'm saying? Let's recap today's class, which is why I look to entertainment and entrepreneurs over athletes. I think I did a masterclass about the has-beens. I don't know if I named it that. I gotta find it, but I'll tell you about it. Anyway, why I look to entertainment entrepreneurs over athletes. People ask me who my virtual mentors are. I've told you what y'all heard those masterclasses. If you haven't, make sure you go check them. Today I'm talking about why. Number one, business owners have to beat more competition to win than sports athletes do, simply because the sports world is finite. There's a limited number of people who can get in competition. In the business world, it is unlimited. Number two, ownership. Athletes do not own anything when they are playing. You are building equity in an organization that you do not own, and when you stop working there, you're gone, but that equity stays at the place that you were working. That's for any job, pretty much. A business is an asset, and what better company to work for than the one that you're actually building equity in through your efforts every single day, like Jay-Z did. Point number three, longevity on the job. Athletic careers are relatively short, 5-6 years average at that's the average number. So some people go above it and many people go below it, and I think these numbers are actually a little bit higher than I thought, honestly. But how long is the average business career for an individual person? You could be in business for as long as you want. It doesn't matter if you can run fast or jump high, which has a limit. There's a shelf life to your physical athletic ability, peak athletic ability. There's no limit to how long your mind can stay sharp. You could be a mental athlete for much longer than you could be a physical athlete. These are the reasons why I look to business people, entrepreneurs, instead of athletes when it comes to my virtual mentors. Work on your game. And oh yeah, if you haven't got my book, Work on Your Game, make sure you go to workonyourgamebook.com, get the hardcover book and over free $1,300 in digital bonuses you get immediate access to right now. That's at workonyourgamebook.com. Work on your game. Dre all day.